Listen, there's a truth most people never understand. Human beings don't run from love. They run from the version of love that overwhelms their nervous system. And when it comes to avoidant men, they're not wired to respond to pressure, force, or emotional intensity. They respond to something deeper, something steadier, something that awakens a quiet recognition inside them that says, this is safe, this is good, this is where I can breathe. What you may not realize is that an avoidant man is always watching. Not in a fearful way, but in a way that tells you his heart is learning how to trust again. He's studying how you move through the world, how you handle your emotions, how you speak, how you live your truth. And whether you know it or not, he sees you. He notices your emotional stability, the way you don't allow the storms of life to pull you out of your center. That calm presence of yours, it's not just attractive, it's healing. It tells him you're not here to consume me. You're here to connect. He notices when you give him space, not as punishment, not as withdrawal, but as love. You're signaling, I am whole, I am strong. I'm not afraid of your distance. That, in his world, becomes sacred. He notices your boundaries, and contrary to what many think, boundaries don't push an avoidant man away. They pull him closer. They show him you value yourself enough to stand firm, and that you're not seeking validation through his availability. He notices your authenticity, your ability to be real, unfiltered, honest. You're not playing games. You're not begging. You're not shrinking. You show up as you, and he feels that more deeply than you'll ever know. And listen carefully, your consistency is a force of nature he respects. Every time you show up with integrity, every time you respond rather than react, every time you stay rooted in truth instead of fear, you're teaching him what safe love looks like. You're dismantling walls he built long before you arrived. And perhaps most powerfully, he notices how you inspire him, how your strength calls him to rise, how your presence makes him want to grow. You don't force evolution, you embody it. And he recognizes the difference. So I want you to hear this with your whole heart. You are not here to chase anyone. You are not here to fix anyone. You are not here to prove your worth to anyone. You are here to be the powerful, grounded, luminous woman who transforms the room simply by breathing. When you stand in that truth, the right man, avoidant or not, won't just stay. He'll choose you. He'll move toward you. He'll open in ways he didn't think he could. Because you didn't fight for his walls. You awakened his desire to take them down. Step into that power. Live from that truth. Let your presence do the work. And watch how everything you've been waiting for begins to rise toward you. Emotional stability is one of the most magnetic and quietly powerful qualities a woman can embody, especially in the eyes of an avoidant man. Many people misunderstand what emotional stability actually means. It's not about suppressing your feelings, pretending you're fine, or avoiding conflict to keep the peace. True emotional stability is the ability to feel deeply without becoming lost in those feelings, to experience emotional waves without letting them drown you, and to respond rather than react. It's presence, it's groundedness, it's a sense of inner clarity that communicates safety at a level deeper than words. Avoidant men, often shaped by past experiences that taught them love is overwhelming or unpredictable, are incredibly sensitive to emotional energy. They may not show it externally, but internally, their nervous system is tracking everything. When someone approaches them with emotional intensity they don't know how to handle, their instinct is withdrawal. It's not because they don't care, it's because their internal alarm system goes off. But when they encounter someone who shows emotion without being consumed by it, who expresses feelings without blaming, who communicates needs without spiraling, something unusual happens inside them. The alarm quiets, their defenses soften, they breathe easier around you. Your emotional stability becomes a sanctuary they didn't realize they were searching for. When you stay centered during conflict, they notice. When you can say, this is how I feel without exploding, collapsing, or attacking, they notice. They see the difference between someone who uses emotion as a weapon and someone who uses emotion as a bridge. Avoidants want closeness, they just fear chaos. And when you speak with clarity instead of confusion, with empathy instead of accusation, you make closeness feel safe. Another thing they sense, often unconsciously, is how you handle your personal disappointments and stress. If you face challenges without turning them into catastrophes, if you can regulate your emotions instead of projecting them, if you can experience pain without requiring someone to rescue you from it, You're showing them something they rarely witness. Strength with softness. They admire it, even if they don't verbalize it. They feel drawn to it because it suggests that you won't make them responsible for your emotional world, something they fear deeply. Emotional stability also means not letting their temporary distance dictate your entire internal state. When they pull back, and avoidants often do, you don't fall apart. You don't chase. You don't panic. You don't personalize. Instead, you remain steady. You trust your value. You stay connected to yourself rather than losing yourself in the relationship. This energy signals to them, she's safe, she's secure, she's not going to collapse if I need a moment. It communicates that you're in control of your emotional experience, which is incredibly comforting to someone who fears being engulfed. What's even more powerful is that emotional stability doesn't require perfection. It simply requires self-awareness. When you say, I'm feeling upset, but I want to talk about this in a grounded way, they feel a sense of relief. When you acknowledge your own patterns with honesty, they feel respect. When you regulate your emotions, you inspire them, not through pressure, but through example. The magnetic pull of emotional stability isn't about being cold or detached. It's about being centered, warm, expressive, and self-contained. It's about having emotions, not being run by them. It's about creating a space where connection feels like expansion, not threat. Avoidant men notice this. They feel it long before they understand it, and it often becomes the very reason they stay, because your presence brings peace to a heart that's used to protecting itself from emotional storms. Giving space without withdrawing love is one of the rarest and most impactful abilities a woman can offer, especially when dealing with an avoidant man. So many people misunderstand space. They think it means distance, silence, punishment, or emotional shutdown. But genuine space, the kind that heals instead of harms, is rooted in confidence, connection, and emotional maturity. It says, I trust myself. I trust the flow of this relationship. And I don't need to cling or chase to feel secure. Avoidant men are wired to protect their independence. Their instinctive pattern is to retreat when they feel overwhelmed. Not because they don't care, but because closeness triggers old, deeply held fears. They need room to process, breathe, recharge, and recalibrate. But here's the part most people miss. They are not only aware of how you respond when they take space, they study it, they feel it, and it directly influences how safe or unsafe the relationship feels to them. When you allow them space without becoming cold, resentful, or withdrawn, you are sending one of the most powerful messages their nervous system can receive. You're free and you're still valued. This combination, freedom with connection, is magnetic. It pulls them toward you because it doesn't replicate the emotional pressure they fear. They notice when you don't take their need for space personally, when you don't spiral into fear, panic, or assumptions, when you don't interrogate them, punish them, or abandon your own life in response. Instead, you continue living, growing, and thriving. You stay emotionally open and receptive while still respecting their boundaries. This creates a sense of balance that avoidant men rarely experience. Imagine what happens inside them. They pull back, expecting the same pattern they've always known. Someone chasing them, someone trying to force closeness, or someone collapsing in fear. But instead, they find you still centered, still warm, still available, just not overreaching. It disrupts their old wiring in the best way possible. It communicates that love doesn't have to feel suffocating or demanding. Giving space without withdrawing love also means maintaining emotional connection even when physical or conversational distance occurs. It's the way you say, take your time, I'm here, without pressure. It's the way you stay consistent in your tone, your warmth, your presence, even when you're not in constant communication. They sense this emotional steadiness and it creates safety. The very thing their avoidant tendencies are trying to find but never quite know how to trust. And here's something important. Giving space does not mean tolerating neglect or accepting emotional crumbs. It doesn't mean disappearing or waiting indefinitely. It means you have your own life, your own goals, your own joy, and you're not trying to make the relationship your entire identity. Avoidant men are deeply attracted to someone who remains self-anchored, someone who can hold love and independence simultaneously. To them, this is emotional gold. They notice when your energy remains soft rather than rigid. They notice when your texts remain warm instead of turning into icy one-word messages meant to communicate punishment. They notice that you don't weaponize silence. You don't try to control the outcome. You simply flow with the natural rhythm of connection and space. And that flow is what makes them feel safe enough to return. What pulls them closer is not the distance itself, but the way you handle the in-between moments, the grace, the acceptance, the quiet confidence that shows you're not trying to cage them. When they feel that freedom, they choose closeness not because they're pressured, but because they're inspired. And when a man who's used to running finally realizes he doesn't have to run from you, something profound shifts. He begins to reach out on his own. He begins to open up more. He begins to show you sides of himself very few people ever see. Because in your presence, he's learning that space isn't a threat. It's simply part of the dance. And your love isn't conditional. It's grounded, steady, and secure. Self-respect and personal boundaries form the foundation of healthy attraction, especially with an avoidant man. While some believe boundaries push avoidant individuals farther away, the opposite is true. Avoidant men feel overwhelmed by neediness, emotional dependency, and people who merge their identity into the relationship, but they feel drawn to someone who honors themselves so deeply that they refuse to abandon their standards, their values, or their emotional well-being for anyone. Boundaries don't repel them, they reassure them. Self-respect doesn't intimidate them, it stabilizes them. When a woman holds strong boundaries, she sends a silent message that speaks straight to the avoidant man's core. I am whole and complete. I choose you, but I don't need to lose myself to love you. This is powerful because avoidant men are hypersensitive to any sign that a relationship will become emotionally consuming. They've learned, often through childhood or past experiences, that closeness can lead to overwhelm, obligation, or loss of autonomy, so they stay alert, constantly scanning for signs of emotional overdependence. When they encounter someone who has her own life, her own standards, and her own path, they feel safe because it means the relationship won't swallow them. Your boundaries reassure them that you won't sacrifice your identity or expect them to sacrifice theirs. They see that you can love deeply while also honoring your own needs, and they admire that. They may not voice it, but they feel it. It creates an environment where closeness doesn't feel like a trap, it feels like a conscious choice. Avoidant men also notice how you enforce your boundaries. They watch whether you clearly and calmly communicate your needs, or whether you explode only after you've reached your limit. They observe whether you say no without guilt, or whether you bend yourself into shapes to avoid disappointing them. They sense the difference between someone who sets boundaries from fear and someone who sets boundaries from self-love. The latter is magnetic. And here's a beautiful truth. Boundaries make love more spacious, not smaller. When you express your limits without anger, such as needing respectful communication, refusing inconsistent behavior, or requiring reciprocity, you're not pushing them away. You're defining the energy in which a healthy relationship can flourish. You're saying, this is the level of love I give, and this is the level of love I accept. This clarity creates a sense of safety for an avoidant man, because it removes the hidden expectations that often trigger his withdrawal. Self-respect also shows up in how you carry yourself. It's in the way you keep your promises to yourself, the way you honor your time, your goals, your friendships, your health, the way you don't abandon your dreams the moment you fall in love. Avoidant men notice when a woman doesn't revolve her world around them. They feel drawn to the steadiness of a life that has purpose beyond the relationship. It tells them you're a partner, not a pursuer, a complement, not a dependent, a co-creator, not someone who needs to be rescued or filled. And perhaps the most important aspect of self-respect is emotional boundaries, the recognition that their emotional fluctuations don't determine your inner state. When they pull back, you don't chase. When they need space, you don't collapse. When they test the waters, intentionally or not, you don't abandon yourself just to keep the connection alive. Your calm consistency shows them you value yourself enough not to negotiate your worth for temporary closeness. This steadiness is what gradually teaches an avoidant man that love doesn't have to cost him his autonomy. It doesn't have to be overwhelming or high pressure. With you, love becomes a place where freedom and commitment coexist. And your self-respect becomes the silent invitation that makes him want to show up with the same integrity, depth, and devotion you embody. Not because you demanded it, but because you inspired it. Authenticity is one of the most irresistibly attractive qualities you can embody, especially to a man with avoidant tendencies. It's not about being loud, dramatic, or overly expressive. Authenticity is the courage to show up as yourself without performing, pretending, or shrinking to fit someone else's expectations. It's the natural confidence that flows from living in alignment with your truth. And avoidant men, though they may not articulate it, are deeply sensitive to this energy. Avoidant men have often experienced relationships where emotional pressure, neediness, or manipulation were present. Many grew up in environments where expressing emotions felt unsafe or where love was conditional. Because of this, they've developed a strong radar for anything that feels forced, inauthentic, or emotionally demanding. They notice subtle shifts in tone, energy, and behavior. When someone is being performative or attempting to win approval, avoidant men don't just see it, they feel it in their body. It signals danger, expectation, obligation. But authenticity? Authenticity feels grounding. It feels clear. It feels honest. It carries no hidden agenda. When you speak your truth without trying to manage their reactions, they relax. When you laugh because something genuinely amuses you, not because you're trying to be likable, they feel connected. When you express interest without chasing, when you say what you mean without sugarcoating, when you share your feelings without making them responsible for fixing them, you create a space where they can breathe. Being authentic means you're not trying to fit into a mold to secure love. You're simply being the most aligned version of yourself. This is powerful for an avoidant man because it shows him you are not operating from fear. It shows him you are not hiding parts of yourself or molding your personality around him. You're not trying to be what you think he wants. You're being who you already are. Authenticity also means emotional honesty. Not emotional dumping, not emotional strategy. You can say, I really enjoy being around you, without worrying if it sounds too eager. You can express, I need more consistency without attacking. You can acknowledge, this is how I feel, without spiraling into insecurity. This level of realness feels refreshing to someone who is used to emotional expectations lurking beneath the surface. An avoidant man pays very close attention to whether your actions match your words. Authentic women don't say they're fine when they're hurt. They don't pretend they don't care when they do. They don't play games or manipulate energy to create desired outcomes. They communicate with clarity, and their emotional transparency doesn't drown the other person. It invites steady connection. What's even more captivating is that authenticity radiates through your entire lifestyle. It shows up in the way you dress, the way you move, the way you choose your hobbies, friendships, and work. When a woman is comfortable in her own skin, unafraid to have opinions or preferences, unbothered by external validation, an avoidant man feels drawn to her presence. She feels real. She feels solid. She feels like someone he can trust. Avoidant men fear emotional entanglement, not emotional truth. When you're authentic, they know where they stand. There's no guessing game. No sudden emotional explosion waiting beneath the surface. No facade that will collapse later. They sense that you're not trying to use relationship as a means of filling a void. You're coming from wholeness. And authenticity isn't about perfection. It's about alignment. It's about living in such a way that your inner world matches your outer expression. When an avoidant man witnesses that in you, your willingness to be seen, to be vulnerable without being chaotic, to be honest without being overwhelming, he experiences a rare type of safety. Because authenticity whispers a truth, his heart desperately wants to hear, you don't have to hide with me. You don't have to perform. You don't have to be perfect. You can simply be, and to someone who spent most of his life protecting himself from closeness, that kind of emotional freedom is magnetic. It makes him want to stay, not because he has to, but because the connection feels real, balanced, and beautifully human. Emotional intelligence is one of the most powerful qualities an avoidant man notices, often long before he consciously understands why he's drawn to you. It's the way you navigate your feelings with clarity rather than chaos, the way you understand the emotional landscape of others without losing yourself, and the way you communicate truth without aggression or neediness. For a man who has learned to protect himself from emotional overwhelm, emotional intelligence feels like a breath of fresh air. It tells him, you're safe here. You won't be misunderstood, attacked, or suffocated. Avoidant men are extremely sensitive to emotional cues. They pay attention to tone, body language, the energy behind your words, not because they're trying to analyze you, but because their nervous system is wired to anticipate emotional pressure. They have learned, usually from early relationships, that emotions can become unpredictable, consuming, or demanding. So they are always scanning for signs of instability or danger. Emotional intelligence is the antidote to this fear. They notice when you can feel your feelings without making them responsible for fixing them. This doesn't mean you never express needs or desires. It means you express them with ownership. Instead of saying, "You made me feel this way," you say, "Here's what I'm feeling and here's what I need." That shift removes pressure and invites understanding. It makes connection feel like a choice rather than a demand. They also notice how you handle conflict. An avoidant man expects confrontation to turn into drama or emotional intensity. When it doesn't, when you stay calm, grounded, and clear, they feel a kind of relief they didn't know they needed. You don't escalate. You don't corner them. You don't weaponize emotional closeness. You approach challenges with curiosity rather than accusation. This shows them that conflict doesn't equal catastrophe. With you, it becomes a path to clarity. Emotional intelligence also shows up in the way you listen. Truly listen. You don't jump in to correct. You don't take things personally before understanding the intention. You create a space where he can share, even in small doses, without fear of being judged, misunderstood, or smothered. Avoidant men often struggle with expressing feelings because they were never given safe emotional containers growing up. When you become that safe container without force or pressure, it quietly rewires what closeness means to him. Another aspect he notices is how you interpret his behavior. Instead of assuming his need for space means rejection, you look beneath the surface. You understand that his temporary distancing is a protective reflex, not a lack of interest. Because you don't react with panic or insecurity, he feels safe enough to return. Your emotional intelligence transforms his retreat into a moment of regulation instead of a trigger for relationship rupture. That alone is transformative for someone who has learned that closeness always leads to chaos. He also notices your self-awareness. When you acknowledge your own patterns, maybe the urge to cling, fear of abandonment, or tendency to overgive, you're demonstrating maturity. You're not expecting him to bear the weight of your emotional history. You're willing to do your own inner work. This inspires him. It signals that you're not seeking a relationship to fill a void, but to share a journey. Emotional intelligence makes your presence feel peaceful, not demanding. It allows him to trust that your emotions won't erupt into sudden storms or silent cold wars. It shows him you can handle your inner world, and that makes him feel safer navigating his own. It reassures him that vulnerability will not lead to entrapment or emotional overwhelm. And perhaps the most magnetic part of emotional intelligence is compassion. Compassion without sacrificing your boundaries. You understand his triggers without enabling them. You empathize without excusing unhealthy behavior. You stay grounded in your truth while respecting his emotional pace. This balance of clarity and kindness creates a type of connection he doesn't often experience, one that feels both deep and breathable. To an avoidant man, emotional intelligence feels like home, steady, warm, and liberating. It's the quiet force that makes him want to stay, not because he's pressured, but because for the first time, emotional closeness feels like freedom. Consistency is one of the most powerful and grounding qualities an avoidant man notices, often more deeply than he notices physical attraction, chemistry, or even compatibility. For someone whose emotional system is wired to anticipate unpredictability, inconsistency, and pressure, your steady presence becomes a life-changing force. Consistency is not about being perfect, predictable, or robotic. It is about emotional reliability. It's about showing up with the same energy, honesty, and stability over time. And for an avoidant man, this is one of the few things that makes him feel safe enough to stay. Avoidant men are used to relationships that swing like pendulums. Intense affection one moment, emotional withdrawal the next. Love that comes with conditions, expectations, or hidden motives. They've learned to distrust closeness, because closeness has often led to chaos, guilt, or obligation. Their nervous system expects emotional waves, so they prepare for them. But when you show up with consistency, consistent tone, consistent kindness, consistent boundaries, consistent truth, you interrupt that pattern. You show them a new experience of connection, one that doesn't activate their instinct to retreat. Consistency is expressed not only in what you say, but how you behave. When your words and actions align, avoidant men notice. When you say, "I care about you," and follow through with steady presence, not overgiving, not withdrawing, he feels that truth. When you express a need and hold the boundary with calm strength, he starts to trust that you mean what you say. And trust is everything for someone who fears intimacy because of past letdowns. One of the most magnetic aspects of your consistency is predictability in emotional expression. This doesn't mean you never feel upset or have hard days. It means your emotions don't explode unpredictably or turn into punishments. You communicate directly. You share feelings without blaming. You don't go from warm to icy in a split second. You don't suddenly withdraw affection to test him or manipulate the situation. This emotional consistency tells him you can relax. I won't blindside you. That is a rare experience for someone who anticipates emotional storms. Consistency also shows up in how you treat him when he pulls back. Avoidant men test, usually unintentionally, whether someone will react with panic, anger, or neediness when they need space. When you remain steady, keep your tone warm, and continue living your life without spiraling into fear, they notice. You don't punish the distance. You don't chase it. You don't change personalities based on their availability. This is powerful because it removes pressure. He doesn't feel like one wrong move will cause emotional detonation. Your consistency and self-care is another form he finds attractive. When you consistently show up for yourself, maintaining your interests, friendships, goals, and personal growth, he sees you as emotionally stable. You're not looking for him to be your everything. You are whole. You have a life rich with purpose. This eases his fear of being consumed or responsible for your emotional fulfillment. He feels inspired, not trapped, drawn in, not pushed away. Consistency in communication is equally important. You speak the same truth whether things are going well or whether there's tension. You don't sugarcoat to avoid conflict, nor do you create drama to gain attention. You're clear, open, and sincere. This helps an avoidant man gradually lower his guard because he starts to believe that he will not be manipulated. Consistency builds trust, and trust slowly dissolves his instinct to flee. Avoidant men also notice consistency in how you treat others. If he sees you being kind to friends, patient with family, or respectful in conflict with people outside the relationship, he begins to understand your character. He sees your integrity. He sees your emotional predictability. These qualities make him feel safer because they demonstrate you're not performing. This is genuinely who you are. And perhaps the most transformative part of consistency is the stability it brings to the relationship dynamic. Instead of reacting to his fears, you respond with maturity. Instead of amplifying insecurity, you anchor the connection. Instead of making love feel like a roller coaster, you make it feel like solid ground. This doesn't make him dependent on you, it makes him open to you. Consistency, for an avoidant man, feels like truth. It feels like safety. It feels like a place where love doesn't demand, overwhelm, or destabilize. And in a world where unpredictability has shaped much of his emotional experience, your steady presence becomes one of the defining reasons he chooses to stay. The ability to inspire growth without forcing it is one of the most quietly transformative qualities an avoidant man notices. It speaks to his deepest desire for evolution and his deepest fear of being pushed before he's ready. Many people misunderstand how growth works with avoidant individuals. They believe that pressuring him, calling him out aggressively, or demanding emotional change will accelerate his transformation. But for an avoidant man, pressure triggers retreat. Forcing growth makes him shut down. Inspiring growth, however, by simply living in alignment with your own highest self, awakens something in him that even he didn't know was possible. Avoidant men move through life with an instinct to protect their autonomy. They guard their inner world fiercely, not because they want to avoid love, but because they fear losing themselves in it. They fear being controlled, judged, or fixed. When someone tries to shape them, they resist, but when someone inspires them, they lean in. They may not show it openly, but they feel it deeply. Inspiration feels safe. It feels expansive. It makes them want to rise. Not because they're being pulled, but because something within them is being awakened. They notice when you are committed to your own growth. When you invest in your emotional evolution, your goals, your healing, your dreams, they feel moved by the energy you carry. You aren't waiting for them to catch up. You aren't putting your life on pause. You're modeling what self-development looks like. This is powerful because avoidant men often admire inner strength from a distance, believing it's something they can't access themselves. When they see you walking your path with consistency and courage, they start to believe change is possible for them too. Your ability to hold space for his growth without rushing him is something he feels deeply. You don't shame him for taking longer. You don't ridicule his pace. You don't demand he transform overnight. Instead, you reflect his potential back to him in a way that feels encouraging, not pressuring. You offer understanding instead of criticism. You celebrate small steps instead of demanding leaps. This approach makes him feel safe enough to try, to explore, to soften. Avoidant men take emotional risks slowly, but when someone accepts their timeline, they begin to open. And when someone inspires them, they begin to evolve. They notice the way you communicate, not with force, but with clarity and kindness. You don't try to control his actions. You simply embody the standards and values that matter to you. You show him what healthy communication looks like because you practice it. You show him emotional courage by being courageously honest. You show him emotional responsibility by owning your triggers. You demonstrate what it means to grow by doing the work on yourself, not demanding it from him. Inspiration doesn't happen through lectures or ultimatums. It happens through example. Your example becomes a roadmap for him, not one he was told to follow, but one he chooses to follow because it feels right. He notices the stability in your emotions, the grounded way you navigate challenges, the compassion you show without sacrificing boundaries. These qualities shift something inside him. They make him reconsider old patterns that no longer serve him. They make him question the walls he's built. They make him believe that closeness doesn't have to be dangerous. He also notices that you don't abandon yourself to accommodate him. This is crucial. When you stay aligned with your truth, you teach him, without a single word, that relationships are healthiest when both people evolve individually and together. When he sees that you don't shrink to avoid conflict, don't settle to avoid loneliness, and don't betray your standards to keep him comfortable, he begins to admire your strength. And admiration is a powerful catalyst for growth. Avoidant men grow in environments where they feel respected, not judged, inspired, not controlled, encouraged, not pushed. Your presence becomes that environment. Your energy becomes the invitation. Your integrity becomes the example. And gradually he begins to rise, not because you demanded more from him, but because you awakened the part of him that always wanted more for himself. This kind of growth is lasting. It's self-chosen. It's rooted in desire, not fear. And when an avoidant man begins to grow through inspiration rather than pressure, he doesn't just stay. He evolves into a partner capable of depth, devotion, and emotional presence in ways he never imagined possible. Thank you for sharing the space and allowing me to support your journey with depth and clarity. Goodbye for now. May your path stay powerful, peaceful, and aligned with your highest truth.